think we should get started. My name's Caroline Douglas and I'm the director of the Contemporary Arts Society, and it is a huge pleasure to welcome everybody to this event today. It's the very first in this new series of events in our continuous professional development programme, and I speak on behalf of all of us who've been involved in organising it to say that we've been overwhelmed by the fantastically positive response that we've had among our sector, and particularly our member museums. The Do the Work programme will run monthly throughout 2021, and it builds out from the discussions that were opened out in our study day at Manchester Art Gallery in November 2018. That event coincided with the exhibition Speech Acts at the gallery, and which was a very important product of the Black Artists and Modernism research project that was led by the artist Sonia Boyce and Dr. Anjali Dalal Clayton. For us at the Contemporary Arts Society, we want to use our convening role to create a space in which to lean in to the question of decolonising our museums. It's a question that needs to be addressed across all aspects of museum work, hence devoting an entire year to it. Our network includes 72 museum members across the UK, which in normal times collectively welcome more than 21 million visitors each year. We embark on this programme, therefore, with the hope of supporting real change to happen inside our institutions and in the experience of museum visitors. For no matter what any of us have done up to this point to promote greater equality, representation and social justice, the events of last summer, the Black Lives Matter marches and actions across the world demonstrated definitively that it is not enough. As an organisation, as a charity, the CAS is overwhelmingly white, in that we differ little from so many organisations in the UK. We approach the Do the Work programme this year in the spirit of learning alongside our museum colleagues, learning together. Because if we don't learn how to be part of the solution, then we will always be part of the problem. Because of the pandemic and the closure of so many of our museums, we seem to have arrived at an inflection point, a moment that seems ripe for reinventing the way that we do things. A return to normal after the health crisis is over would be a return to inequality. What we have now is a chance to grasp and embed change. I'd like to thank Dr. Anjali Dalal Clayton of the Decolonising Arts Institute at UAL and my own colleague, Dr. Ilaria Puri-Purini, for conceptualising and putting together this programme. I'd also like to thank Professor Paul Goodwin for agreeing to lead today's session. And in the sense that we are collectively co-authoring this new process and hopefully a body of knowledge, I'd like to thank everyone who has come with material prepared to share. Thank you very much indeed for joining us in this collective endeavour. I'm looking forward to a really super interesting couple of hours with you all. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Paul Goodwin to begin the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you to Anjali and to Ilaria for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be able to moderate this event. I think let's start on a positive note in the sense that Trump is now leaving the office today as we speak. And although Biden, I'm sure, there's lots of challenges, there is definitely a landmark that has occurred, and that can hopefully provide some inspiration for us. Having said that, I think the title of this event, Doing the Work, is very apt. We've got a lot of work to do, as Caroline just pointed out. What I want to do now, and I've got a wonderful script written for me by Anjali Dalal Clayton, which I'm going to read, which is going to basically cover, I'm going to explain what the purpose of the program is, what we're trying to do today, how we'll do it, how the day will work, the structure of the day, and just some kind of housekeeping for how we're going to facilitate this workshop today. So, doing the work, embedding anti-racism and decolonisation in museum practice is the title of this event. And this is a series of practice-focused workshops devised by the Contemporary Art Society, as Caroline mentioned, and the Decolonising Arts Institute at University of the Arts London, where I'm also a professor. So there are 8 workshops in the entire series, each of which focus on a different area of museum work. The purpose of today's workshop, the purpose of the workshops generally, the thinking behind them is to provide a space for people working in and with museums to talk openly about their experiences of trying to embed anti-racism and decolonisation into their work. And I'm sure as we go along today, we'll be kind of focusing and unpacking what anti-racism and decolonisation actually mean in practice, in how we use them, because there are many definitions circulating. And some of them are conflicting. So it'd be good to be, I think the work that we'll do today is about locating that in our individual practices. And so it's about trying to embed anti-racism and decolonisation in their work, but also the challenges that we are facing, and to come up with the idea of the workshop, to come up with workable strategies that can be tested back in our places of work. And they've been designed, the workshop been designed so that everyone attending will be able to participate in an intimate setting, in a supportive manner, so that we can all work together to devise more effective ways of doing this important work that we have to do. This workshop looks at curating, and it's the first in this series. And some of the things that we might discuss include the following. Right? So what kinds of curatorial strategies might be considered as decolonial or anti-racist in approach? Should artworks depicting explicit and implicit violent colonial histories ever be included in exhibitions and displays? And if so, why and how? How can anti-racist or decolonial curatorial approaches be developed in contexts where such approaches are resisted or even discouraged? I'm sure that's familiar to many of us here. What questions, approaches, and behaviours should curators be embedding into their day-to-day practices? So how does this relate to your day-to-day practice? How can anti-racist or decolonial approaches be developed in relation to collections that are ethnically diverse, and conversely, in relation to collections that are not, right? So what's the challenges for collections that we face? And also, what curatorial models can be used when displaying work by artists whose biographies and attitudes are deemed, quote unquote, problematic, racist, or colonial? So these are some of the questions that I think we'll be able to discuss at length in the breakout groups. So I'll explain in a minute. So in terms of how this will work, the format and the running order, we're going to start off after I speak with the workshop with presentations that should help us to really start thinking about some of the issues and challenges at hand and the possible strategies to deal with them. Unfortunately, due to personal health reasons, Renee Musai from Autograph is not able to join us today, unfortunately. However, we are very lucky to be still hearing from Kate Jessen and Nikita Gill. Kate is modern and contemporary curator at Manchester Art Gallery, and Nikita is working with Kate at Manchester as an Innova curatorial trainee. So after the presentations, we'll then take a short 5-minute comfort break, and then go straight into our breakout groups, where we'll be discussing an example of a challenge we're grappling with, or a curatorial approach that we've tried or trialed, for better or worse. And through our conversation and discussion, try to come up with other tools, approaches, and initiatives that we can realistically test out in our respective workplaces. So the ideas about these breakout groups is to have a safe space, really, that we can actually share our examples and practices that that basically can help inspire new ideas. So the breakout sessions will last approximately 50 minutes, so quite a lot of time. To everyone in the group will have time to present and to talk about some examples that they want to bring to the table. After that 15 minutes, we'll come back together to hear what the other groups have been talking about, and they'll be reporting back from each group 1 or 2 points that summarize the main issues. An important point that I need to make is that, and you've already been told this by email, but we just need to remind you that the workshop is being recorded, right? But the recordings will not be published. So that's really important, I think, for the success of this workshop. The recordings will not be published. They will be held securely by the Contemporary Art Society and only used for anonymized transcriptions, which will provide the basis of a report on the workshop that will be distributed to everyone in the workshop. So the idea about that, of course, is that we have a record of what people are saying, that it will be anonymized in transcription so that you can speak freely, really, and don't have to worry about various repercussions. So that's kind of an overview of what we're going to do today. I hope that's clear. If it isn't, please send questions in the chat, and we can address that as we move on. But now I think we're going to move on to our presentation with Kate and Nikita. So I'll pass over to them. Thank you.
So I can't see Nikita, but I presume she's there.
I'm here.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Can you all see my slide share? Can you see it, Kate?
Yes.
Good.
Great. Let's start with the first image then, please. Thank you for inviting both of us here today. We're very much picking up on the work that we've done since Speech Acts, but going back a bit as well. We very much see this as an opportunity to think out loud. So we don't know the answers, but we're very keen to talk about the problems, potential barriers and opportunities that the wider context within which we operate has afforded us. So I'd like to start with exhibitions. Exhibitions as the main means by which we as curators demonstrate our institutional values publicly. I think there are a number of problems with exhibitions. The exhibitions are temporary, they pop up and pop down. We too often align them to anniversaries and or festivals, which are also temporary by their very nature too. We often use them to explain in exhibition proposals why we want to curate a particular exhibition in the first place. They give us good context. Yet 3 to 4 months later, literally in the blink of an eye, the exhibition is archived. Although I use the word archive loosely here because we'll come on to the problem with archives shortly. Exhibitions are quickly forgotten. Institutional amnesia quickly kicks in. Is this why all our past work does not resonate in the present, so has therefore failed to affect the future? I find this image of an exhibition, The Other Story, that took place in Manchester Art Gallery in 1990, very uncomfortable to look at. This now is our office space at Manchester Art Gallery. It's the hub of where all ideas and all actions are activated. It's where Speech Acts was planned. And it's where I said that I had never heard of Lee Wan Cha or David Medela. And I literally sit where these artworks were once hanging. If I ever feel uncomfortable or concerned or worried about the decolonising work that we're undertaking, I refer back to this image. I think because in order to channel the guilt that I feel, I know I want to ensure that no future artists have the experience that artists, including Rasheen, have encountered in their careers. So I would argue that our exhibition and engagement programs are like an out of control conveyor belt of stuff. We no longer put something on it before it drops off the end into obscurity, much like the old generation game. Can anyone actually remember what they curated in the last few years? Key to this is the need to do less better. It's not just what we are doing, but it's how we are doing it that's key. So why is no one pressing the emergency stop button? We are too caught up in a system that endlessly asks for more visitors, more activity to leave them, more funding, with visitor numbers seen as the main arbiter of success. Next image, please, Nikita. And now I'd like to touch upon the problem with collection displays. We as curators hold the power to change our curatorial methods and expand the stories our exhibitions tell. That's a lot of power. Our collection displays make us feel uncomfortable at Manchester Art Gallery. What are they currently saying about us? About identity and about Manchester and British identity. Unlike temporary exhibitions, it's currently a narrative that's fixed and permanent. We started to talk about this uncomfortableness together across all teams at Manchester Art Gallery back in 2017, and we continue to do so. During the making of 6 acts with artist Sonia Boyce, one of those 6 acts became known as Nymphgate. Rightly, Nymphgate is many things for many people, but for me, it was about showing our whiteness, our white privilege, and the power that we hold within the gallery to change and expand the stories that our collections tell. Next image, Nikita. Six acts in the exhibition with Sonia Boyce is trying to challenge the difference between an exhibition and a display and bring that together into a single programme. So 6 acts started with looking at our collection. It then became a temporary exhibition that came about because we were required to do an exhibition about the anniversary of the Royal Academy and chose Sonia Boyce. And then next image, please, Nikita. And now 6 acts, 6 permanently in the start of our collection redisplay. With a really important question that pretty much covers everything that we have been doing. Whose power is on display? Next image, Nikita. Now, amongst the permanence of our collection displays is the ongoing history of temporary interventions. These pop up and these pop down too. This is a slide of an image from our collection and also an image by contemporary artist Rakib Shaw of his response to this painting. I use it because our collections are known through reproduction and through distribution by many artists who come to Manchester without realising that these paintings that they know from their own backgrounds, from their own pasts, are hanging on the walls of Manchester Art Gallery. Next image, please. So these are more examples. There are hundreds of examples of ways in which we have temporarily tried to expand the stories that our collections tell. Next image, please. And sometimes, as is demonstrated by this slide, the work that we do isn't archived. There is nothing to learn from the experience, which I think is hugely problematic. So we've got the same marginalisation here as that of temporary exhibitions. The project happens, but then what happens? Hidden stories currently remain hidden. Uncomfortable truths remain uncomfortable. It's our responsibility to expand the collection narrative permanently. Next image, please, Nikita. The proposition behind the Speech Acts exhibitions was to ask, amongst a number of things, what would happen if we remove traditional curatorial devices of control, geography, chronology, and the lens of identity, for example. Speech Acts was a proposition for what an exhibition and display combo, there must be a new word that comes out of collections and displays, would look like if you took away traditional curatorial control. It was also a proposition to address the issue of funding and our ability to sustain funding, because without sustained funding, all of our efforts will fail. Project funding is a critical barrier to success. I also thought it was important to note that this work is not just in response to Black Lives Matters and the statements that our directors put out at the time. There are other things going on as well. Brexit being another critical issue connected to our identity, and the importance of being able to reflect migration and immigration in our understanding of Britishness. What we need to show is just how complicated our nation's history truly is. Galleries can be at the heart of our reckoning with our colonial past, and I'm convinced we can rise to this challenge. Next image, please, Nikita. This is an image of a project that's probably the most temporary project I've ever done, a School of Integration as part of the Manchester International Festival. I was trying to poke at this notion that the international is somewhere else and not already actually in Manchester. I learned a lot through doing the School of Integration. It was the first time ever in 25 years of curating that I've had no objects, I've had people. It's been critical to understanding how to expand ideas of how institutions care, support and develop communities as much as they care for their objects. It was an exercise to listen, learn and to take action together. It was also raised lots of questions around the effects that our diversity and inclusion programs have had over the years. This notion of how we as organisations sort of carve up society into different sorts of people that we then attract to different sorts of programming activity without necessarily reflecting that our civic public institutions are unique and pivotal in how we come to understand how other people may think and feel that's not like us, in particularly in these sort of such polarized times within which we operate. So placing community at the heart of what we do, what would this look like? And then finally, So just after lockdown version 1, we rehung the introductory gallery, which we've called What is Manchester Art Gallery, for it to open in the first phase of having visitors back in the art gallery. Hence a terrible image, because all of those things are disrupted. Is de-imperialising a better word than decolonising? We're currently defining what these terms mean to us as an institution. Our displays don't reflect our history, they construct it in the first place, and curation tends to tidy up the messiness of identity. But we have a duty to show entanglements, and we have a duty to expand our understanding of Britishness, so that everyone feels that they belong and that the cultural institution can love them back. So we're confronting the histories and hierarchies that are embedded in who we are as an institution and who we are as a city. Key to this is understanding how all of the stuff comes to be in Manchester Art Gallery in the first place. Just flip back to that other image a sec, Nikita. It's quite hard to see in this image, but this is a painting of by George Stubbs. It's a painting that reveals, or can reveal, if we allow it to, how closely our trading and political power are linked. It can also reveal what we mean by sovereignty in the context of taking it back through Brexit. We believe it's an old and outdated belief that Britain was a nation that had an empire and can therefore be represented separately from it. What if Britain is understood as an empire and its history understood as formed in its imperial connections, i.e. to regard British history as imperial rather than national? Otherwise, the broader histories that constitute who we are erased. We need to understand these histories if we are to understand who we are today and how we got here. This is what British history looks like. Decolonising the gallery is to recover our histories that have made us who we are and to account for them. I could go on, but it's really important that I demonstrate what diversity looks like for us, problematic word, and introduce Nikita. How am I doing for time? Let me very quickly.
I think the joint presentation was meant to be until 1, but I guess we've got some flexibility.
Oh my gosh, was it?
In the program, but I mean, so we move on to Nikita's presentation.
We'll move on to Nikita. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Nikita Gill. Nikita is a curator in training for Future Collect, a 3-year initiative led by Innova, who is at the very start of her curatorial journey.
Thank you, Kate. That was obviously really interesting, and there's so much to learn about how we do the work. And I'm going to pick up on some of the things Kate's discussing by talking about how we're bringing collections and exhibitions together. So I'm a curator in training, and I consider this to be anti-racist work as it comes out of the intentional actions to be supported by Future Collect and Manchester Art Gallery to provide equitable opportunity to operate as at a more senior level within an institution. My role here isn't a response to Black Lives Matter. Future Collect exists at the intersection of very real and very present concerns for our society. And it also exists in this particular form because it emerges interwoven as a montage of this historically important moment, that of Brexit, of Black Lives Matter, of COVID-19, of the re-heightening awareness of systematic racism within our cultural institutions. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing nature of lockdowns in Northwest and nationwide, Manchester Art Gallery is closed to the public. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to share a little about how Kate and I have brought the idea of collections and exhibitions closer together. As you enter the gallery through the Mosley Street entrance and you take the stone staircase up one floor, on your left is the gallery that Kate just referenced, the introductory gallery it's called, and to your right is Gallery 11, which is where our journey starts. It's called Constellations, Care and Resistance, and it's an exhibition, a research space referencing patterns that emerge from looking at clusters of stars and planets in our solar system. And these were understood in astronomy as a way for cultures to spark curiosity, to share memories and explore multiple perspectives. And I use it here to present the simultaneity of stories, applying the notion that a constellation is, as Walter Benjamin wrote, a logical alternative to the narration of history as a linear progression. Part studio and part exhibition space, we aim to share our learning as we begin to unpack progress and knowledge as something that expands rather than something that moves simply forward. Our constellation expands ideas initiated by artist practice. Artist Jade Montserrat works at the heart of it. Fragments of memory, traces of conversation painted in watercolor, handwritten notes, in handmade, hand-bound books, text forming skin and shadow bodies dancing across paper, the black body present. Her text-based and figurative art is poetic and questioning and challenging also. It features works that speak of the body boldly displayed, seeing oneself through the eyes of others, erasure and our right to ask more of our monuments. Montserrat's practice, the creative labour that sits at the intersection of art and activism, continuously opens new paths of interrogation across the matrix of history, exposing gaps in our fixation on visual and linguistic habits. In this space, work spanning 5 years comes together to form new conversations with works from within the gallery's collection, including Claudette Johnson, Ian Hamilton Finlay, and Mark Titchener. There have been other iterations of constellations within the realm of visual arts. Tate Liverpool's Constellation saw artists used as a spark for revolutionary ideas that emerge from the modern world and the human condition. Whilst in Manchester in 2011, Corner House had a constellation that saw artists use transitory materials to bring into focus ephemerality and impermanence. Another constellation still at the Studio Museum Harlem saw collections employed as material and conceptual anchors, exploring themes of the figure, formal abstraction, economy, and African diasporic history and materiality. Our constellation, Care and Resistance, sits within this collective effort to better understand our relationship with each other and through the art that we collect and the artists who create them. Our spark is that care can be an act of resistance, resisting oppression and silence. I'm just going to give a caution here that as remarked on the questions that will come to you later, I will be depicting an image of explicit and implicit violence. And this is about oppression and silence, and hopefully a learning opportunity, really. So the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests this summer have increased the consciousness of systematic, institutional racism. First used 7 years ago, the phrase Black Lives Matter was a necessary protest against racially motivated violence and police brutality, such as in the case of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, and so many more. It has gained prominence throughout the subsequent years as our capabilities to share information about such violent instances and also share experiences of different forms of racially motivated oppression have come into wider view. Though I'd like to note here that the phrase Black Lives Matters is also applicable to for Damilola Taylor, Stephen Lawrence, Emmett Till, and many others from times past. So what does this have to do with our institutions, and what part does the art world play in sharing responsibilities for the misappropriation and silencing of Black bodies, the Black experience and Black voices? So I just wanted to kind of highlight where we go wrong sometimes, I feel, in displaying the Black body without conversation, without learning opportunities and paintings and artworks by white artists of Black bodies. The first being Dana Schutz's Open Caskets, displayed at the Whitney Biennial, and the response to that of artist Parker Bright protesting with the Black Death spectacle. There have been other conversations too, such as Luke Willis Thompson's auto-portrait of Diamond, who is Philando Castile's partner, who had recorded a police officer fatally shooting her partner during a traffic stop in the US, which was widely circulated, and the controversy surrounding I suppose a white appearing artist being able to portray a Black body for the purpose of view. And in comparison, Henry Taylor's The Times They Ain't Changing Fast Enough. So how in Manchester Art Gallery are we treating Black bodies? So as Kate mentioned before, we had 6 acts by Sonia Boyce. Act 1 of 6 acts was actually a performance that saw artist Lasana Shabazz portraying Ira Aldridge, who was an actor who was well known for his artwork of his theatre work within the regions of the UK. He was born in the US, but found fame here. And he was also subsequently painted by James Northcote in 1826. Manchester Art Gallery often highlights this painting as the first artwork collected by the gallery. And here Lasana Shabazz embodies Ira as a human. Where we go wrong, I feel, is that the institution often highlights this painting without the idea that originally it was entitled Head of a Negro and not Ira Aldridge as Othello, the Moor of Venice. Also, that Ira is playing Othello, written by Shakespeare, again, a white man who has written the play as of a Black man, and a white man who is painting him. And so while we hold this painting up, there is that sense of overwhelming whiteness that is present within it that we never really discuss in great detail. Over the course of the summer, Jade and I had conversations about Ira Aldridge, holding him up to think about this missing story and how he could be considered a symbol of resistance by learning about Ira as an actor who worked within the city. So there are so many more things that I want to say, but I'm also really conscious of time. I just wanted to give you a short insight into some of the works that I'm currently engaging with, and some of the issues that are still necessary to address among collections, among institutions, and anti-racist work, and what we do with the statement Black Lives Matter when we are utilizing the Black body as a site of either celebration or virtue signaling. So I'll leave it there for now, but I could talk to anyone about much more of the presentation at another time.
Thank you so much, Kate and Nikita, for really rich presentations that I think covered so much of the territory that we're going to be looking at today. I think we've got about 5 minutes, really. So instead of me kind of hogging the space in terms of asking lots of questions, which I do have lots of questions for both of you, I think I'd like to open it up to the audience, or to the participants, sorry. So if you'd like to, okay, let's have a look. If you'd like to, 7 or 10 minutes, Angeli's saying, okay. So we have a bit more time, But if you've got any questions, there's two ways you can do it, either by putting the questions in the text and I can try to track it, or you can just indicate that you want to speak by turning your mic on and then asking the question. Okay. As I don't see anything at the moment, while we're doing that, there's a few things that struck me from the presentations, from both presentations. I think there was a really strong ethical charge, the ethics of curating. What do we ethically need to do? How are we situated in relation to the images? What are the responsibilities that we have as curators, both black and white and Asian or whatever, to display? Display is not a neutral thing. Display involves, as Nikita beautifully put it, it can involve commodity fetishism of black bodies, for example, or it can be used for virtual signaling, all kinds of reasons. So we need to really be ethically, have strong ethical questions that need to be responsibilities that we need to kind of think about in relation to images. And I think that came across really strongly. There was a question about temporality in exhibition making that I thought was interesting from Kate, which is this key distinction between exhibitions and displays, which I think is a really important distinction, because the main distinction actually is probably a temporal one. Exhibitions being temporary exhibitions and displays being displays are temporary displays but reflect the collections. So I thought that was really interesting to think about that, and how we adapt our curatorial strategies to think through the temporalities of display, and how that relates to the questions that we're looking at. So, for example, many black artists, if we look at the history of the exhibitions, are often, they're in and they're out. They're very short temporalities. They're often temporary displays, and then they're out, temporary exhibitions, and they're out. When we need to focus more on, do we need, as Kate suggested, a combination of the two? How do we work the two together? So I thought that was a really interesting question. So just while we're waiting for some questions, for Kate and Nikita, where, in terms of these really strong ethical questions, these questions about your responsibility to what the work you're showing, where are you getting your inspiration from for that? Is that from reading critical theory texts? Is it from reading Black feminism? Is it from reading, is it from activism? Is it from reading art historical texts? Where is the knowledge that what's feeding into your kind of curatorial strategies in relation to these difficult questions? And that's a question to Kate or Nikita.
I'll answer first. I think it's a combination of all of those things, Paul. The sharing of reading lists, the carving out of time to be able to read in the first place. No curator reads anything within the hours within which they are paid, unfortunately. It seems to be a thing within our industry that the minute you become a curator, you cease to think about the act of curating, which was the sole purpose of studying curating, which I think is also connected to our overproducing all of the time. I think it also comes with being very open about not being keepers of knowledge, being open about not knowing stuff, and working with people, with constituents, with colleagues, with people in professions outside of art, who can help us to better understand ourselves. And it's also by, I mean, Nikita literally is off a master's course. So Nikita does bring to the institution a lot of recent thinking, which is great. The young people need to keep us oldies on our toes at all times. And also it's our ability to now start to think about having a teaching role within those master's curating courses. So at an earlier stage, thinking comes together with the practical side.
Great, thank you. Nikita, do you want to respond?
Yeah. I'm currently reading The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study I can send a list of all of the things that I'm reading after, if everyone wants to. But something that particularly struck me, Blackness still has work to do to discover the rerouting encoded in the work of art is a starting point for me. And I'm also reading Lexicon of the Mouth, Politics and Poetics of Voice and Oral Imaginary, especially working with Jade, and her performance and text-based work has been really, really informative and transformative in thinking of the voice as a softer act of resistance, or one that people might not recognize, or the body doing something, or for example, Shy Radicals. I don't know if anyone has heard of
Hamza Ashan.
Yeah. And the kind of the introvert's guide to radical change, basically. I am extremely introverted and extremely shy, and so that has been quite powerful as a person of color at this. And I'd just like to stop and say as well, I started my traineeship in January. We were in lockdown by March, and then all of the protests happening, the influx of information, being the only Black curator within the institution who is currently a trainee, it has been a lesson in thinking about what is needed to protect myself from the trauma of understanding, and the trauma that comes with the more knowledge that you gain, basically. And it's really important that that we unpack more about Ira Aldridge being the first object in the collection as being more than just an object of fetishization, can't say that word. And here, I just want to quote, he clearly played multiple roles in elite identity, serving as a plaything, status symbol, rescuer, benefactor, confidant, muse, often simultaneously. The positive views they exhibit existed alongside racist considerations. He was the color of sin and had redeemed himself through an exemplary life. So I think that is something that really needs to be unpacked within, especially historic collections, when we look at paintings of either Black people in positions higher than is expected, quote unquote, or in positions of trauma or violence. There is a middle, there is a regular Black figure, and that's where I'm taking inspiration from in order to move forward academically. But again, I can write the list of those books I'm reading.
That would be amazing, Nikita, and there's some great references there, and really useful to share those with the participants. What I can suggest is that we can come back to that a bit later in the final section. When we do the summing up, perhaps we can address some of those questions there, if that's okay to everyone. Because what we want to do now is we're going to have a short break, a comfort break for 5 minutes. It's important. I don't know how about you guys, but I find that when I'm doing online events, I definitely need a break, because we're all living through a Zoom kind of continuum right now, where we need a break, right? So we'll have a break, but please, during the break, keep the Zoom meeting open, right? Just switch off your camera and mic if you step away, and then we'll come back in approximately 5 minutes at 1:30. Okay, so we'll have a break now and then come back. Then when you come back, you'll be in your breakout groups. Thank you.